Hello again. Today's interview is on the theme of how to work with hedgehogs. I've covered it from a different angle in a previous video. This one is how to work in a hedgehog hospital. I talked to Debbie Davidson and I'll be covering 3 topics with Debbie. First of all, the skills that you need to acquire to work with hedgehogs. Secondly, what are the personal qualities that you need to develop? And finally, I asked Debbie if she could offer any advice or come up with a suggested career plan on working with hedgehogs. Enjoy the video.
Right, the main remit of the hospital is obviously to take in sick and injured hedgehogs and do the very best we can to then get those hedgehogs back into the wild where they belong. That's the easy bit. The hard bit is the fundraising bit. Obviously, there is a lot of fundraising involved because as a charity, we are living on public money. And so there are a lot of fundraising things to do, as well as the care of the hedgehogs.
Debbie, what's your role at the hospital?
I'm actually a trustee of the hospital. So as part of that, we have trustees meetings regularly on a regular basis as per the Charity Commission's remit. We make decisions regarding big outgoings, anything over a few £100. We have to have an agreed way forward to spend the money, which is on the trustees meetings. We've got responsibility of the charity. For example, if Veronica ended up going into hospital, then it would mean that the trustees have to step up to care for the hedgehogs while she's not here. I'm also obviously a volunteer, so I do a lot of cleaning out. I'm also trained to do the injections, do the medications for the hedgehogs. And I also do the educational talks that we give to children's groups, schools, brownies, etc., and also to adult groups, WIs, gardening clubs, etc. Veronica and her husband, Frank, they founded the charity. It wasn't a charity, it was originally just Ronnie and Frank, with the help and support of a lady who ran a rescue in Louth called Elaine. They just started taking hedgehogs in, and then it became bigger and bigger. But that was like nearly 26 years ago they started doing that, and we became a charity in 2015.
Can the job at the hospital be divided up into annual, seasonal and monthly duties?
When the hedgehogs first come out of hibernation, if they can't find enough food or anything like that, they tend to become poorly quite quickly because they haven't got the strength to fight off. So we're quite busy first thing in spring. So there is a lot of animal care to do at that time. Then we get to the baby season, the hoglet season, which is sort of late spring, early summer. Then we get that. So at that time, when we start getting the orphaned hoglets in, or hoglets that have been injured, or mums that have been killed and babies that have been found, then obviously it's slightly different in the fact that the hoglets' care is very different if they have to be hand reared. And then there's obviously a process of weaning them onto proper food and things like that. So there is sort of times of the year that you're a lot busier for different reasons, but I wouldn't say that there was any time of the year that you could specifically say that this job is more important than that job.
What is the situation, Debbie, with nutrition regarding feeding mealworms? There seems to be an unproven horror story out there about if you feed mealworms to hedgehogs, the legs are going to fall off or the bones will dissolve or something.
Yeah, it is. I think it's the same old story. Chinese whispers get made a lot bigger, don't they? Basically, mealworms are like us and chocolate. You absolutely love it, but it's got no nutritional value whatsoever. Now, a few mealworms, i.e. a large, fully grown hedgehog eating the mealworms that have fallen out of your bird table is not going to harm them. But if you put a full plate with no other foods available of mealworms, like cousin chocolate, do you want to eat your carrots or do you want to eat your chocolate? You know, you're going to eat your chocolate first, aren't you? Let's be honest. And that's what hedgehogs do because they prefer to eat them. But if they are a young developing hedgehog, what it does, it imbalances the calcium and phosphorus uptake in their body. And we need calcium and phosphorus for proper bone development, bone strength, and bone growth. So when people say it'll make the legs fall off or the legs, what it does, it weakens the bone structure. So it can either cause deformities or easy breakage. Right. So that's if they're given them at a very young age. Like I say, the hedgehogs in my garden hoover up all the bits from under my bird table. That small amount's not going to do them any harm. It's feeding them on a regular basis as their only food.
I mean, I'm being flippant, but what we're talking about is metabolic bone disease, isn't it?
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Debbie, what's the hospital's goal, please?
Right. The remit of the charity is to rescue, rehabilitate and release as many of the hedgehogs that are viable for release into the wild. And the other ethos is education and putting because hedgehogs are now basically classed as an endangered species, as you know, it's putting out there the education so we can get the general public and young children. The next generation is one of our biggest things we aim for, to actually think about what is happening in their own country. Because if you ask a child what an endangered species is, they'll say an elephant or a tiger, and there's one on the doorstep. Do you know what I mean? So that's the other ethos, is the education and the trying to help the hedgehog survive, basically.
What do we know, Debbie, about the population trend in Britain? Is it stable, increasing, decreasing?
We had over 900 hedgehogs come through the rescue last year, round about 900 hedgehogs. Now, I've been here 13 years, and 10 years ago, we were getting nowhere near that number. And I think that is because of the education that people are now getting as to what is right and wrong and what is to expect and what to feed, what not to feed, how to help, is actually getting out there. And that's why we're getting more through the door. And in the same breath, that means that we're getting more out the door.
Debbie, can you describe your own connection with hedgehogs, please?
My other life. My partner would say that. To be honest, I've always been very much a wildlife person. I was brought up being dragged around the RSPB reserves and woods and things like that. I've always loved my wildlife. I've been a member of the WWF since I was 16. I was one of those people on my soapbox 20 years ago talking about climate change and nobody'd listen. So I've always been very, very involved in the countryside and country life. It's always been a love. Then when I found this hedgehog and I came here, it was just a wonderful feeling. It was just, and then a bit later on, I found a little tiny one outside my house, and he was only 79 grams. And I actually eventually hand reared him and then released him back to the wild. Well, I sobbed, but you know. And it was just that hands-on. Before, it'd always just been in books, it'd always been raising money, it'd just been doing little bits in your own garden, but it became something real, something bigger. And then from there, I do everything. I do the shows, I do the talks, I do a lot of craft stuff, I make things and to sell, and I'm just here. Wednesday, my life on a Wednesday is here, basically.
Debbie, does the hospital take on volunteers?
Yes, we've had a few that have gone to veterinary school.
Debbie, what are the skills and personal qualities that make a successful hedgehog volunteer or rehabilitator?
I think the main thing is caring.
I'd like to give you a scenario, Debbie, if you can give me your opinion. So, a hedgehog appears in somebody's garden in spring. They start to feed it. Comes every night. They fall in love with it. It's fantastic. It's charismatic.
Yeah.
August comes around and they go on holiday for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Cease feeding it. They throw some food out into the lawn all over the place, but they're not sure whether or not that's enough. They come back 2.5 weeks later. No more hedgehog.
Yeah.
Hedgehog disappeared. Will it come back? Has it died of starvation? What can they do?
Right. Hedgehogs can walk a very long way for food. Okay. They know naturally how much food they need to survive properly. We encourage people to feed them in their own gardens because that means that they don't have to walk as far, therefore they become healthier, heavier, etc. quickly. Just because one person stops feeding them for 2 weeks does not mean that that hedgehog will not stay fit and healthy, because basically, like I say, they have a route that they follow generally. And if all of a sudden, as part of that route, they think, they're not here, and they'll probably come back a few days, but on the 3rd or 4th day and it's still not there, they'll probably then go off and find the food somewhere else. If they then start feeding it again, if it's kept the same route but just avoids their feeding area, they might actually sniff out that food again. So they may come back. It might be that they've found a completely new source and they think, well, I'm not bothering walking over there when I don't have to. Do you know what I mean? So it's very much, it's like we've had questions when people say, but if we feed them, doesn't that take away the natural instinct of feeding themselves? No, it doesn't, because the amount that we feed them isn't enough to sustain that hedgehog. So they won't lose their natural instincts just because we give them a bowl of cat biscuits every night.
Grant. Debbie, hedgehogs, we've talked about them being endangered. What is your view of current conservation efforts going on in the UK for hedgehog conservation today?
Do I have to be politically correct?
No.
To be honest, it's not just hedgehogs, it's the whole British wildlife situation. I mean, the hedgehog's only natural predator is a badger. And that's because it's the only animal that, once it's curled up in a ball, can actually pull it apart. Now, hedgehogs and badgers come from the same area. Their natural thing is the same area. And deciduous woodlands, they eat the same kind of diet, the things like that. Years ago, when we had plenty of woodland, plenty of areas for badgers and hedgehogs to live quite happily side by side, there wasn't a problem. Humans have imbalanced nature by purely being human beings, basically demanding more food. So farmers take hedgerows down to make crops bigger, demanding more properties, more industry. So we're taking away this land. So it's got to be man that puts that imbalance right. It's got to be. There's nobody else can do it. So there's got to be a real definite effort to make to put that imbalance back, because it's all right in reintroducing beavers. If we imbalance the wildlife anywhere, it has a knock-on effect to something else. In the old days, when people were not culling, but we were hunter-gatherers, there was never a problem of getting too many badgers, too many boars, too many wolves, too many any other animal, because we were killing them to eat them. But now that's all stopped, and we've just got an imbalance of nature, and it doesn't matter if it's for the hedgehog, for the red squirrel, for whatever. And at the end of the day, we need to start at the base level, and this is what I always encourage the children to, at schools and that. Just chuck your leaves in a corner, let your wood rot down, plant some wildflowers. That encourages the insects. The hedgehogs need the insects. The birds need the insects, the bees need the flowers. we just need to increase that whole circle of life.
How do you see hedgehog conservation changing over the next 10 years in the UK?
Like with a lot of animals, we've got more urban than rural now, because they're learning to adapt. Nature is a very clever thing. Animals learn to adapt very quickly to a new environment. So I think a lot of the conservation is about educating people, looking at new sites for new developments for houses and things like that, making builders just, okay, put your concrete bases in your fences, but make sure there's a small hole in one. So hedgehogs, you can make hedgehogs corridors and things like that. And I think we need to push for more involvement with these people that are building houses, building industry, to make wildlife corridors, and make it more wildlife friendly in areas where they're building and taking over their natural habitat.
Debbie, for anybody watching this wanting to work with hedgehogs, what advice can you offer, please?
The local rescue is the best place to start if they think they're going to be interested, because what you don't want to do is start something like a degree course or whatever because you're aiming in one direction and then realize that's not really for me. So I would always say get volunteering, get in touch with your local rescue, have a look online, see what's available near you, just go for it.
Debbie, is there anything that you'd like to add?
I'm sure any animal rescue would give people the satisfaction that it gives me. Get out there and get involved. And Andrew was the first hedgehog that came in. He was found in a doctor's car park, and the head doctor was called Andrew, which is why so it was always Andrew's Hedgehog Hospital, because Andrew was the figurehead hog.
I love that.
Yeah.
Debbie, it's been a fascinating insight. Thank you very much indeed for appearing on the Practical Animal channel. Debbie Davidson.
Thanks. Bye.